The Redefined podcast is part of the Winmate Give podcast network.
You know, the people that are the most grateful in life are usually the ones that have been smacked in the face more than anyone else. It's ironic, isn't it, that folks who've gone through the toughest appreciate the sunshine that much more. And in fact, our guest today has an appreciation for the sunshine and the clouds and for the rain and for everything else. And I'm excited to have my fun and fantastic friend Bunny Terry joining us down in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Bunny Terry, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Depends on when someone's listening to our podcast, but I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Bunny, you're one of those weird realtors like me. Why real estate? Why in the world did you say, I'm going to chase after this career that is filled with emotional drama and all these huge opportunities and everything else?
Well, it wasn't a career I chased. It was, and I suspect this is true of a lot of realtors. It was a career I fell into at a moment when I needed to do something. I was a paralegal for 27 years, and I raised my kids on my own, and I wanted to move back to my hometown, a small farming and ranching community in New Mexico, and which also has a lake and a resort. And I thought, what? I'll continue to be a paralegal. I'll do that. I'll do it by distance, and I'll do it in the middle of the night, but I also am going to sell real estate. So it might have been an accidental career, but one that I discovered I was really well suited for.
And you've had some great success as a realtor, certainly accolades that most people would covet and want. But Bunny, it hasn't always been a smooth ride. And in hearing and understanding some of your story, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, because I see part of my story in you, and I see this fun little connection and journey. And so I'm going to interrupt you 1,000 times over as we talk, because I have a hard time keeping my mouth shut. But nonetheless, I wanna go back because I see where you are now, right? Great family. You get to be a grandma. You get to be partners with me at Real Brokerage, which is super fun. You're living your best life now, but it hasn't always been your best life, Bunny. In fact, I want to just take a moment. You shared with me before we started that you lost both your parents in the last 4 months. That's gotta hurt.
I'm completely transparent. I'm 63 years old. I was born in 1960. My parents were, my dad was 91 and passed away in August. And he was my biggest champion. But he was ill. I mean, he had Parkinson's, he had other things going on. To the last moment, he was lucid. But when he passed away in August, it was, it was a relief of sorts, because his suffering was over.
Isn't it a weird thing? It's like, oh, thank goodness they're dead. But like you and I are people of faith. We know that that heaven is real, and it's a selfish thing that we hang on to. And it's also, man, it's so exhausting in that same season, right? Because the final days are riddled with beauty. But beauty, right?
Yes. And we were all present in the final days. But I'll tell you, my dad fought to the last moment, only because he and my mom had been crazy about each other since the 4th grade. They got married in 1950. They were married 73 years, and they still were one another's best friends and greatest loves. And he said the day before he died, he said, I can't leave your mom. I can't leave your mom. I can't leave your mom. And we were we gathered around him and said, Dad, we'll take care of her. And when he passed, we all celebrated, because he had been such a good and faithful servant. I knew he was celebrated in heaven. But then my mom, who was in really great shape, and nursing a broken heart, obviously, from the moment he died, she passed away on November 9th. So they were 79 days apart.
Oh my gosh.
And her death was a surprise to us. I mean, she's 89, but she was in really great health. We still had to celebrate because we knew that was I mean, they both had prayed all their life to go together. So they almost did it. But it's a big hole in my heart.
Man, and as we record this, it's 5 days out from Christmas, and you're about to spend your first holiday without your parents. And I lost my mom when I was 21. You lost your parents when you were 63. It's always freaking hard, Bunny.
Yeah, it's always freaking hard. I keep trying to pick up the phone and call her because I want to tell her, you know, we had this great client party at our new office the other day, and I thought, oh, I got to call mom and tell her how that went, because she loved that. She also was a great champion. So my heart is with everybody who has lost a parent. It's
holidays are tough, aren't they?
They are. Yes.
Shoot. Well, the fact that you lost both your parents, you know, I have an aunt and uncle that died within like 4 days of each other. COVID got both of them, and it has just completely wrecked their daughters. And I don't pray that wrecking for you, but
I don't have that. I'll tell you, the hardest thing for me, Eric, is going to church, because that was, I mean, I grew up in a home where we went to church every time they opened the doors, and that my mom stood next to me and sang. So that's hard, but it's also a gift. I mean, it's so sweet to have had that in my life. And they taught me a lot of stuff. I mean, my dad was the original, he was the OG gratitude nerd, because but if you ask my dad any day of his life, and this is a guy who was a dry land farmer and had never, ever any money, who graded roads at nights and farmed during the day so that he could keep food on the table. And if you asked him how he was, his response was, if things were any better, I'd have to be two people.
Yeah.
Always. It was never, I just wrote a story about this horrible storm that we went through when I was a child, where one crop got wiped out by hail, and then he replanted in it. Then we had the driest summer on record. And my dad he still sat down at the table every night and said, thank you, thank you, thank you. So that's, and I think that's important stuff to teach our kids.
I mean, yeah. Gratitude is a perspective thing. I'll say this, Bunny. Last night I went on a dude date with my son. My son Simon is 7 years old, and my wife and my daughter's 9. They had a book study. They have this mother-daughter book study, which is such a cool thing. And so I went on a dude date with my son, and we went to his favorite restaurant, and then we went to this arcade, and I spent $50 on the dumbest games, and it was gone in the blink of an eye. And we had an awesome time, and he's laughing hysterically, and we're having this amazing bonding moment. And afterwards, like, the card that you use to pay for the $50 of crap at the arcade, you get like points on some games. So we go into the little store, and he has enough points to get a keychain and 2 Tootsie Rolls. And he loses it. He completely derails and is frustrated. And we're walking out, and I go, Simon, what's wrong? He goes, nothing ever goes my way. And he has this line in this vein of stinking thinking, which is a pretty dangerous thing. And it breaks my heart as his dad, because I try to talk about the sunshine, and I try to talk about the optimism. So I literally, in the car ride home and at home last night and this morning as well, I spent this time trying to talk to him about gratitude. And I try to talk to him about the things that we get. And if there's one thing that falls out of line, we tend to focus on just that. And your dad had all these reasons to focus on things like that. You have all these reasons right now to focus on your holidays without your parents. Whatever you focus on expands, Bunny. And early on, you had a great example in your dad being this hopeless optimist, or at least this beacon of positivity, but you didn't come from a lot, right? Walk me through what life was like in small town Farmville in New Mexico.
Well, we had when you're a dryland farmer, what that means is that you have no irrigation. And we're in New Mexico, which is very arid, but it, you know, it was the life my dad grew up in. And this is the story I wrote yesterday. I have a practice every morning. I write 1,000 words every morning.
That's a lot. A 1,000 words is probably 4 pages, right?
It's not, yeah, maybe, but it's, you know, this is just stream of consciousness. I'm writing, or I try really, the night before, right before I go to bed, I write down in my planner, you know, Ruby, stop that. The dog. Anyway, I write down, you know, I wanted to, it's helpful to me right now to write about my parents. And so I wrote Dad and the weather, because I had been thinking about the weather, and I'd been thinking about how my dad lived by the weather. And I wrote this story about how we stood on the back porch and watched the weather every evening. And part of what I learned from him was that the things we can't control are the things we can't control. So even though he lived and died by the weather, and we thought about it all the time, we spent a lot of years when he didn't make the bank payment, and my mom made all of our clothes. I thought that she did that because she liked to. You know, I'm from a different generation. This was the 60s and the 70s. And so there weren't a lot of affluent people where I lived. So it wasn't that we were, you know, we didn't go hungry. I came from this huge family. I have 64 first cousins, and my parents are both the youngest of 10. So I was surrounded by a lot of love. But I'm telling you, we never ate in a restaurant. We never went on vacations unless it was to put stuff in the back of the pickup and go camping. So I mean, that might be one of the great gifts I got, was that we never had a lot, except we had a lot that wasn't material. I will say that, and you and I talked about this before we began the podcast, I did grow up with this attitude about money that, and I got to tell you, I think it's because we didn't have it, but that people who had money, or people who made a lot of money, or people who thought about money were somehow had less character than we did. I think that that's one of the incorrect lessons that I learned. I learned a lot of good stuff, but that's not a good one.
Yeah, same girl, same. I remember having graduated from college, and I went into the ministry for almost a decade. And the ministry was fantastic. Obviously, you get a chance to serve people. You're working at a place that you love, and you think it checks all the boxes. And then it's like, well, this nonprofit is really difficult in which to be aspirational for my family. And money isn't everything, but it sure buys time, and it sure opens up some doors. And when I started in real estate full time, I remember my first year full time, I made and netted $200,000. And that's a lot of money today, or back in 2011 or 2011 when that happened, regardless of. And I had wealth guilt. I felt like I had to be the guy on Glengarry Glen Ross and The Boiler Room and The Wolf of Wall Street, where I was using people, and I couldn't categorize money and character in the same accord. I felt guilty for having it, and I never knew great models of how to use it for God's glory.
Absolutely.
Is that a paralleling experience for you?
Well, and I had to learn, and luckily I was in an environment, and I had a couple of coaches who said, you know, the best thing about money is what you can do with it to help others. And, you know, I took that to heart. And the first year, I'll just say the first 10 years of my real estate career were kind of a wash, because I lived in my hometown. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. I never made a lot of money, but it kept the wolf from the door for me and for my kids. The second 10 years, I started learning that, you know, you needed to state what you wanted, and you needed to be clear about how you were going to use. For me, I had to be clear about how I was going to use that income to help others. And I stood up in a team meeting my second week at my new brokerage in Santa Fe 10 years ago. And I said, I'm going to give $10,000 to the Cancer Foundation for New Mexico. I had just gotten over the diagnosis that I had. And I know everybody in the room was like, she's a newbie and she's crazy. She's not going to write a check for 10 grand. But Eric, I was just slowly learning that I had to know where I was going. I had to know my aiming point, and I had to be really public about it in ways that would hold me accountable. And I'd never done that before. Now, if I had said that to my mom and dad, they'd have been like, oh, now hang on, don't get too big for your britches. Right? It was so interesting to have them on the shoulders saying, you know, stay humble, stay kind. And then to have these big dreams. I didn't know you could do both things.
So you had to marry together the optimism and the gratitude, regardless of the lack of rain,
Right.
along with a tenacity and a drive and a grit and a hunger to not play small. And I'm not saying that your parents played small. Being a farmer is one of the riskiest gigs that you can do. And it is riddled with so much emotion and pain and that sort. But I mean, you have to know that, like, people that say that money doesn't buy happiness is never giving it all away. Like, I literally right before this, I had a quick brunch because I'm booked through lunch and I hadn't had breakfast, so I'm going to call it brunch. And I'm at the restaurant next door to my office and sat down, and this server is always so good. I don't even know her name, Bunny, but she's always good and smiles and laughs and just brings this great energy. And I had to get out of there to come and record this. I literally had 20 minutes for breakfast, and they were quick to bring it to me. And so she wasn't even tending to me outside of one visit. And I plopped down $100 and left on a like a $16 tab. And I gifted her $100 because I now have this life that gives me an opportunity to be a blessing to others with my dollars. I always want to be a blessing to others with my gifts, but like, I get a chance to spread that joy, and ain't no better feeling than impacting someone. And was that the drug that you got addicted to when you finally tasted financial success? Was the $10,000 you wanted to donate? Was that the thing that was the driver for you? Like there's something inside of you, Bunny, that said, I got to play bigger. I gotta make more. I got to do more. And I don't want to be guilted by what I have.
So there were a few things. As you alluded to, I had this devastating cancer diagnosis that was a complete surprise to me.
How old were you when this happened, Bunny?
It was in 2012. I was 51, and I thought I was the healthiest person in the room. I had just moved to Santa Fe. I was living the dream.
But you, as a realtor, moving to a new community is oftentimes your previous experience has no bearing on that, because this is a relationship game. So you are literally starting a brand new business with a brand new database. That's got to be scary.
Well, I had just moved in August of 2012, and I had kept my license at my old brokerage only because I wanted to explore brokerages here. And we had some big ranches listed, and there was going to be a decent payoff. It wasn't going to be like I've experienced in this city, but I had kept my license in Santa Fe, and I got up one day with a pain in my left side and feeling really dizzy and woozy. And I thought, man, I shouldn't have gone for such a long run yesterday. And I really was healthy, I believed. And at the urging of a friend of mine, because she said, you're not sounding right. You just don't sound like yourself. And I tried to pass out in the aisle at the grocery store. I went to urgent care, and this young doctor said, I think you have appendicitis. You should go to the hospital. Your blood pressure is really low. You need some blood work. We need to figure out what's going on. I went to the ER on a Friday night thinking that I was they're gonna take a look at me and send me home because I was so healthy. And instead, they told me I had a 5.5 centimeter tumor in my colon that had perforated my colon wall, and that my hemoglobin was so low that if I had come in as a as a trauma patient, I would be dead. And
Wow.
I had a corresponding tumor on my liver. And I have no history of colon cancer in my family. And I'm sending this out as a warning. If you're having weird symptoms, you gotta go get a scan. And colon cancer is projected to be the largest cause of cancer death among people under 40
Really?
in the next decade, because maybe it's an environmental issue, but people aren't getting screened because their doctors are telling them, oh, it's not a big deal, who knows. But I didn't have any symptoms, and I hear this story a lot. And I had a doctor come in 2 days after I went to the hospital, an oncologist. I've never met an oncologist before. I wasn't even sure what they did. But he said, you have stage 4 cancer. And the only thing I knew about it was that there was no stage 5. And I was like, and
were you 4A or 4B?
I was just stage 4 colon
Okay,
cancer.
yeah, okay.
They attach those letters to different kinds of cancer, but because I had a tumor in one place and a metastases in another place, and my lymph nodes were involved, it was stage 4 colon cancer. And
I want to pause for a moment.
okay.
So Bonnie, I was 16 when my mom got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And I don't know, like, I know about her journey. She made it 5 years before she passed. But it's like a death sentence. I remember going with one of my mentors, and we went out to breakfast, and reality hadn't set in for me. And he said, Hatch, what are you going to do when your mom dies?
Holy mackerels.
And we have that kind of relationship where we speak really directly. And he's like, she has a 10% chance to live. The odds are your mom's going to die. I believe that God can and will work miracles, but what are you going to do when your mom dies? And as a 16-year-old, processing this is really difficult because it never entered into my mind until that conversation that she was actually going to die. And so I want to come back to your story, Bunny. You get a stage 4 diagnosis. Is that a death sentence to you?
I did the thing that the doctor told me not to do. The next day, when I immediately got set up on all the stuff, starting chemo, getting ready for surgery. And he said, the one thing the doctor said to me, and I would say this to anybody else, is he said, don't go home and get on the internet. Don't do it. But I did, because it's what I did for a living anyway. I was a digital marketer for a lot of different people in addition to being a realtor. And I went home and got on the internet, and I read that I had, on some sites, I had a 2% chance of 5 years of survival. And on the other sites, it was about 15. And I wrote down in my journal, I said, I have a daughter in college. I have my son and his wife are pregnant with their first child. I'm going to be in that 15%. And so I would never say to people that is what got me to this point, but I would say it was important to me at the time to say, if it's a 15% chance, if I have a 15% chance of survival, I'm going to be in that 15%. There were lots of days when I was like, ick. Yeah, go ahead.
How the hell do you manifest a 15% survival?
I did not manifest it.
Okay.
I was extremely lucky, Eric. I responded well to the chemo. I had a liver tumor that was in a place. Your liver is so tricky. But I had a tumor that was the size of a small plum on my liver. And it was in a place where surgery was an option. I didn't know that for a long time. I didn't know that for the first 3 months of treatment. But I saw a surgeon who said, I do this every day. You're a good candidate. So I was extremely lucky, and everything worked in my favor. But I will say, and this is what I wrote about in my book, it's called Life-Saving Gratitude. I got a copy right here. Is that, and this book came out of the 1,000 words that I wrote every day while I was sick. It's less than 365,000 words, but because that's how many I had in the beginning. But
Oh my gosh,
I
that's a
would call
long book.
my parents would call, and they spent a lot of time here, but they would call every evening, and my mom would want to know the details. What'd you do? How did you feel, etc. And then my dad would get on the phone and he would say, he called me nubbin, which is what the smallest ear of corn on a stalk is called. And I was the baby of the family. And he'd say, Nubbin, what are you grateful for today? And I'd say, Dad, are you joking? Because I don't feel very grateful. I'm like, my hair is thinning and I'm in the bathroom all the time. I feel like crap. I'm not grateful right this minute. And he said, name 3 things right now. I'd be, I'm grateful that I have this Ambien prescription that will help me sleep. And I'm grateful that we didn't have to fight with the pharmacy to get my prescription filled. And I'm grateful that I got to eat lunch today. And he would say, that's good, to write it down in that red notebook. And he would make me write it down, and it became a practice, a very grudging practice. I so begrudged every for the first month or so when he would make me do that. And so you can imagine how much I miss him, because he still would ask me that a year ago. And he so believed that was a part of surviving life. And it was true for me.
How much of your survival would you attribute to mindset? Obviously, you said that your body responded well to the doctor's procedures, that the tumor was in a place that was operable. And so you said luck. Sure. Sure. But obviously luck had to have matched the right mindset, because if you had a case of stinking thinking, I don't know if the results would have probably been a clean bill of health.
I agree with you. And there are lots of books written on how mindset helps with healing. And so I tend to think that it was at least 40% of my survival, if not more. There were lots of days that I could have laid down on that red couch and stopped. I could have put up my hand and said, no more. I'm not going again to treatment. Preparing for surgery was so scary. And, I knew they were going to cut my gut open and take out 12 inches or more of my colon, and they were going to lop off part of my liver. And I knew, and I'll tell you, I worried about the wrong stuff all the time. I worried about money, and I worried about money. Because I had not yet moved my license to Santa Fe. And, but then I would have that conversation with my dad, and he would and he did it. It was sort of magical the way that he did it every night right before I was going to go to bed, because then I would lay there and think, I am grateful. I mean, think of the people I'm getting to meet. Think of the, think of the things I'm getting to learn. I'm not a Pollyanna, and I think there's some danger in relentlessly telling people they need to be optimistic. I think I think we need to be realistic, but I also know that a practice every day of stepping back and realizing how blessed we are is important, not just a healing, but it's important. I mean, I've trained myself. My first prayer of the day is thank you, thank you, thank you. That's it. Just when I wake up, that's what I say as a matter of course. And now it's, thank you for the perfect clients I get to meet and help every day. And that's the best affirmation I have, is that thank you affirmation.
Bunny, I want to go to the first 30 or so days of your diagnosis. you read online that you have a 2 to 15% chance to beat this and to live. That's got to be tumultuous. And then you have your dad, this gratitude guy, every day telling you to write down your gratitude, and you were begrudgingly doing so. How did it change, and how long did it take for you to change to find the gratitude before you were pushed to find it? Because your dad, from the sounds of it, was a pusher, intentionally so, helping you to grow and mature your perspective. But how long did it take until you actually started that as a habit instead of it as a forced hand in it?
I would say, so I was diagnosed on November 9th, and I had my first treatment on December 2nd because, Eric, I had canceled my health insurance. So I had to wait to get on a new health plan in December. So that first month was really a blur. I had a lot of procedures that were done. I ended up paying for that for years, that first month. But so there was that extra level. So I would say it wasn't until after the new year. So it was a little less than 60 days. And, which I think is, everybody has a different theory on what it takes to create a new habit, but it was probably just under 60 days.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I started to realize, by January, the 1st of January, I had 3 treatments. And I started to realize that the only way I could get up and go to those treatments, my daughter was my caregiver, so she was pushing me too, because she wanted me to be well. I was still single at that time. And I realized that when I followed that practice, it was easier for me to get up and do the hard stuff. There was another moment that was really important, and this is important in my training as well, even today, is that on the day of my first oncology visit, we went to my church, and my pastor at the time, we got in a circle with the staff and they prayed over us, but he prayed the coolest prayer ever. He didn't pray for healing. He didn't pray for the sort of things that I had heard all my life. I heard people pray. He prayed for me to have blinders on and for me to only see the one thing in front of me that I had to do that day. And he said,
that's a good prayer.
Oh my gosh, it was so full of grace. I mean, he prayed for grace to see that. He said, you only have to do the thing in front of you. Don't think about the future. Don't think about 3 weeks from now or 6 months from now or 2 years from now. Only the thing that he prayed for. I call it the blinders prayer. And it was really important at the time for me to just put blinders on and only see the thing in front of me that I had to do. And that became really helpful. I mean, I still do that. Sometimes when I feel incredibly overwhelmed in my business or leading my marketing group, I just think, wait a second. The thing I know we need to plan, and I know we need to know what our destination is, but what I got to do is the one thing that's going to move things forward today. That's it. I sometimes say that prayer for myself.
But Bunny, that is obviously when you're facing insurmountable pain and odds and complications, that is such a good prayer. But I saw your transition there, and had you not gone there, I was going to go there. So thank you for leading it, because it is such a profoundly simple and necessary business strategy. If you want to make $100,000 a year, you don't focus on $100,000 a year. You focus on what do you do today and what can you control today, and that's it. If you want to make $1 million or $1 billion, you need to concentrate on what can I do today to move that needle forward? What do I do so I can finish the day and say, yep, I checked that box. Let me say this. I have some people in my life that I love dearly, and they are fueled with anxiety. Anxiety is, I think, another form of pessimism. But let me
It
be
is.
clear on this, because if this is a sound bite, I'm going to get in trouble, because I want to explain it in full. I think that optimists and pessimists, same thing. It's just the expected outcome. I think both are realists. I think that your dad knew, Bunny, that it was going to be a drought and it was going to be a painful time. I don't think that he ignored the pain. He just chose on what he was going to focus on. He prayed for and hoped for a great outcome. A pessimist knows that there's going to be a drought. Somebody with anxiety knows that there's going to be a drought, and they expect bad to come from it. They expect it not to go their way. And what you focus on expands. I'm convinced of it. And so this blinders thing, I'm going to remember this for forever, this pray for blinders, because it is a powerful prayer.
There's a hurdle. Every day has a hurdle that you need to get over if you're going to move your life in the direction you want it to go. And so he said, just let her see the hurdle in front of her. And on that day, the hurdle was to go see the oncologist. I was scared out of my mind. And so was my daughter, Johanna. And yet, by breaking it into pieces and knowing that the only thing I had to do was go to see the oncologist that day, it was like I could somehow bear it. Mm-hmm. And it's what I tell people on my team now is, what is the daily activity? What's the thing that's going to that's going to ensure in your mind, like you said, at the end of the day, that you moved the needle forward, that you got closer to the destination. And when you were talking about the optimist and the pessimist, I was thinking about how important it is that the quality of your journey it drives the quality of your life. So if you're in that pessimistic mode, I'm telling you, the quality of the journey is pretty compromised. I mean, we may end up in the same destination. We may not, but and yet, if I know that my arrival at that destination is going to be fueled by thinking good thoughts and seeing what's happening positively, I know from experience now that that's the journey I want to be on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, to put a bow on that, optimists and pessimists are both realists. Yes. They're just choosing on which destination they're going to pursue, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Bunny,
yes.
A little sidebar. Have you ever heard of the prayer of Jabez?
I have, but I cannot tell you what it is.
Yeah, it's so it was introduced to me years ago, and I just found it back in my life recently. I think it's in Second Chronicles, and literally, Chronicles is a painful book to read because it's all like Bunny is daughter of Joe, who's son of, like, I mean, all these things. It's just like lineage. And then there's two little verses in which Jabez comes in, and the name Jabez means like born from pain, causes pain. That's what Jabez meant. People gave literal names back in Old Testament times, and so I would have been Balding Ginger would have been my name, right? Like that. They gave very, very literal names to people, and his name literally meant caused pain because he caused his mother so much pain in childbirth. And it goes on after all this lineage. Then it says, and Jabez, like, his destiny was to be somebody that caused pain. And then it says, and Jabez prayed this prayer, and I'm going to butcher it here, but it's Lord, that you would bless me indeed and expand my territory, and basically use me as an instrument for peace, and that you keep me from harm. And then it says, and God granted him that prayer. And it's so interesting because I think that sometimes when we're in the midst of cancer and we're in the midst of droughts in our life and bad business, we're just praying for the rain. We're praying for our load to be lightened. But I think that there's a maturing prayer that has now shown itself in your life where you're praying for abundance. and you're praying for an unfair share, and you're praying that God use you as a tool and use you for his glory, and that he puts more opportunity in front of you. I think sometimes we're hesitant to want that for our lives because it's met with an ounce of like, well, I'm nobody special. Like, if not you, then who? Like,
Right.
I want to say this because I hear it in your prayers and I see it manifested in your life. Don't you want your kids and your grandkids to have the most unbelievable everything?
I do. And the other piece of this that is really important, Eric, is that I want it for everyone, but I really want it for the people who work with me. I mean, tell me the name of that book you wrote again about the person
Yeah,
beside
it's
you.
called play for the person next to you. Yep.
That is my I mean, the reason I'm heavily involved in this nonprofit. I'm the board chair now.
Yeah.
And it is so, I mean, I wake up, and I'm sure this is a product of my upbringing, but I wake up thinking, who can I help get closer to success today? I mean, that, it's, I live comfortably now. I don't worry about money. I'm not afraid they're going to turn the electricity off like they did a lot when I was a single mom. What I wake up thinking about is, how can I help this new broker that I just brought on? How can he have the best year of his entire life? And how can he do it in a way that I didn't know how to do in the beginning? I learned so many things. I mean, I'm an old dog and I learned a lot of tricks. I'm still every day learning more. I'm on every podcast. I'm at every class I can get to, but I think, how can I help somebody else get there more quickly and more abundantly? So when you said praying for abundance, I pray for abundance.
But
For the people
that's
I partner
showing
with.
in your life now. It's
Yes.
when you can't breathe, you pray for breath. And once you can breathe, you pray for vision and destiny, and you pray for an anointing on your life, and you pray for more. I want my kids to have and experience the world. I actually want them to experience pain. I want them to maintain perspective. But I want to give my kids everything. I think that's what our God wants too. Is I think that he wants to give us everything. We have to meet it with open arms, and that means an optimistic look. That means, Bunny, with your parents having recently passed, and knowing what they meant for you, I can't imagine how proud they are of the way in which you serve and love and have changed your stars and are continuing to give back. Because my guess is, whether it's that new agent in your marketing group that you're supporting, or it's that $10,000 check you wanted to cut, I'm sure you've given way more than 10,000. I'm sure
I have.
you've impacted way more than that
Yeah.
one new agent,
Yes.
and you got a lot of years left in you, even at the ripe young age of 63.
Well, it's all an adventure. And when you face death, I mean, I had a letter from my oncologist who said I would live 12 months. And I was just reading that, and I go back and read that in the book. Every once in a while I read that chapter because it was so devastating. And it was a letter so that I could get my life insurance cashed out. And we opted not to send it. I was just like, I'm not sending a letter to anybody that says I have 12 months to live. And so when you face that sort of a prognosis, and it means that every day it's like, man, I have to use my time really wisely. I have to impact as many people as possible, because I know what it's like. I mean, like your mentor said to you about your mom, I know what it's like to think, this may be the last thing I do.
I
It's
think
important.
that when my mentor asked me that question, like, what are you going to do when your mom dies? It forced me, just like it forced you, to say, I don't want to be lukewarm anymore.
No.
I don't want to go with the flow. I want to take bigger swings and bigger risks and show more love and have more gratitude. And regardless of the way in which the story is going to end, I'm going to have a pretty beautiful lead up to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Bunny, super grateful for your time. Folks, if you didn't hear it, the book is called Life-Saving Gratitude by Bunny Terry, a fantastic realtor, a great leader, a survivor, a thriver, and someone who is filled with abundance. Bunny, thank you for the gifts you gave us today.
Thank you so much. You're doing the same thing, Eric.
Oh, thank you. Hey, gang, if you liked today's episode, what you need to do is smash that subscribe button so you can keep on keeping on with the Redefined podcast. My name's Eric Hatch. We will be back with another episode coming hot and ready for you very soon. And in the meantime, we will catch you all on the flippity flip. God bless.